This is our first webinar in 2025 from the Artificial Intelligence Community of Practice. If you don't know me, my name is Ripan Chakraborty. I'm currently the lead of this community of practice through AIPM, of course, and I'm also a senior lecturer at UNSW Canberra uh, on systems engineering and decision analytics. So the topic of the event is, of course, artificial intelligence governance for project managers. Expectedly, we will see some AI-related discussions and the ethical AI and governance thing, but I don't want to give words beforehand. And of course, in terms of Dr. Rob Nicholls, he is a senior research associate at the University of Sydney. His research interests focus on the intersection of technology and regulation. He is part of the Center for AI Trust and Governance at at University of Sydney. His first degree was in Electronics and Communications Engineering from the University of Birmingham. And later he also did MA and PhD from UNSW Sydney. Before moving to academia, he had a unbelievable, 40-year career, including work with law firms and the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, ACCC. Rob is an accredited mediator and from 2012 to 2020 was Australia's independent telecommunications adjudicator. Sorry for my misspelling, mispronunciation of that. So again, thank you, Rob. Thanks for being the first presenter for 2025 webinar series. And of course, as I said, this is a fantastic topic, and you can see from the participant numbers, there is a huge traction of the topic. So please feel free to share your screen and start the presentation. Thank you, Rob.
Thanks very much indeed, Ripon. That's a very, very kind introduction. And it's really great to be here. I'm looking forward to this presentation on AI governance for project managers. I've got to confess, my research focus is much more on AI trust and governance than it is on project management. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the never ceded lands on which all of us join today. I'm on the land of the Gadigal people, who are part of the Eora Nation, and I'd particularly like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and especially to any First Nations people joining us on this Zoom call today. Well, there's a sort of, we're here to talk about AI governance, but before we talk about governance of itself, I think it's worth looking at some of the changes that are already occurring in how project management is operated and across the project life cycle. Ripon mentioned that I'm originally an engineer fallen amongst lawyers. But I do still do little bits of work in the telco sector, and I'm always amazed by how great the extent is about things that are associated with AI, such as scheduling tools, risk assessment software. Looking back, particularly, for example, in the context of Cyclone Alfred, looking at what was done in the project management of recovery of other disasters that could be applied here. We're seeing changes in resource allocation. AI can be used to find the best team members for specific tasks based on skills and experience. We're seeing the other side, good or bad, AI-powered chatbots providing first-line support and answers to common queries. This leads to some benefits: increased efficiency, reduced costs, improved accuracy, and better informed decision making. In my view, it's not loss of jobs, it's actually being able to focus on the more interesting stuff. And so project managers start to move their focus from some of the day-to-day issues onto strategic leadership and complex projects, problem solving. You don't need to imagine having a virtual assistant that can proactively identify risks weeks before they'd normally become apparent, because you can have an AI support that will do that for you. Using agentic AI, you could have a system that automatically adjusts resource allocation when unforeseen delays are starting to come in. However, this is a big however. AI isn't a magic bullet. And importantly, it's certainly not a set and forget technology. AI of itself can introduce new risks. It can introduce ethical dilemmas. Um, for example, what happens when a biased algorithm consistently underestimates the time required for tasks performed by a particular demographic group? What if those AI chatbots are sending misleading information to stakeholders? And what if major system errors are occurring, but no one's looking? Ultimately, this is why AI governance becomes absolutely essential in all projects. Without proper governance, the potential benefits of AI can quickly be overshadowed. We need to ensure that AI is used responsibly, ethically, and effectively in our projects. So, what is AI governance? Apologies. What is AI governance? Well, it's a framework of principles, policies, and practices to try and ensure that there's responsible development and deployment of AI systems. Now, this means maximizing the benefits of AI while minimizing its risks. Often the term guardrails is used in respect of AI, keeping AI on the right track. And I think it's important to distinguish AI governance from IT governance. There's an overlap, but AI governance addresses some specific challenges that are posed by AI itself. They include things like algorithmic bias, the need and importance of explainability in AI decision making, and the potential for autonomous systems to act in unexpected ways. General IT governance focuses on things like data security, access control, systems reliability, critical and very important issues. But AI governance goes further. It asks questions like, is the data used to train this AI system representative and unbiased? Can we understand why the AI made a particular recommendation? Who is ultimately accountable for the decisions made by an AI system? And there are several emerging frameworks and standards that inform AI governance. Some are industry specific, others are more general. Here in Australia, we have the AI ethics principles. They're key, they're very valuable to provide a high level ethical framework, and they look at things like human centered values, fairness, privacy protection, reliability, and accountability. They're not legally binding, they're voluntary, but they offer some really useful guidance for organizations that are developing and deploying AI systems. There are also international standards, and being in project management, it's likely that some of the time you're going to be working with international clients or international firms. Those international standards, the Australian voluntary standard, they're all trying to do the same thing, but it raises an issue. AI governance isn't just a technical thing. It's a really important issue if you're going to be able to have a fair approach to ethical, legal, and societal implications of your project. So, what are the key pillars of AI governance? Well, I'm going to pick 5 key pillars here, and they are ones that they generally come up. There are 5 or 6 or 7 or 4, but accountability is always important, transparency, fairness, reliability and safety, and human oversight. So, accountability means establishing clear lines of responsibility for AI systems and the decisions they make. Who's responsible for designing, developing, deploying, and monitoring the artificial intelligence systems? Who is accountable if something goes wrong? And this is not blame assignment, it's making sure that there's a designated individual or team responsible for overseeing the AI system's performance and addressing issues that arise. This is one of the areas that you can't use AI for. Transparency is understandability. How did an AI arrive at a particular conclusion? This is sometimes referred to as explainable AI or XAI. Transparency is really important for building trust and to ensure that AI systems are used appropriately. Fairness is about ensuring that the systems don't perpetuate or amplify existing biases. AI models are trained on data, and if that data reflects societal biases, the AI system will likely learn and reproduce those biases. And that can lead to discriminatory outcomes. That's unacceptable, but worse, it's also likely to be illegal. Reliability and safety. So AI systems need to be robust, secure, and work as intended. They need to be resilient and resistant to malicious attacks. And that's particularly important in high stakes applications where AI driven decisions can have significant consequences. And how do you deal with that? Well, human oversight emphasizes the importance of maintaining both human control and the ability to have human intervention. So we use AI as a tool that assists us but doesn't replace us. There needs to be mechanisms all of the time for human review and override of AI decisions, especially in critical situations. And what I'd argue is that these 5 pillars, or 6 or 7 if you use somebody else's, they provide the foundation of a robust AI governance framework. So let's have a look at how governance applies throughout a project lifestyle. So if we start with initiation and planning phases, this is where crucial decisions are made and they set the stage for the entire project. And this is where I feel very much like teaching you to suck eggs. But during initiation, one question that is really going to be valuable is AI the right solution for this problem? Don't use AI just for the sake of using AI. And this is important because many businesses say, oh, well, we'll just use AI. But if the benefits outweigh the risks and costs, well, great, do it. But if you don't know that that will happen, don't use it because you really have to have a thorough understanding of the problem you're trying to solve and how AI technologies that are available will help. This is also the time where ethical considerations need to be front and center. What are the potential ethical implications of using AI in a project? Could it discriminate against certain groups? Could it violate privacy? And what data have you got? What's the quality of that data? Is it going to be useful in training and validating an AI model? Um, do you have data of sufficient quality? And is it relevant data? In the planning phase, there's another thing to do, which is look at clear objectives, success metrics, and risk mitigation strategies. But if you're using AI, you need to tailor those to the AI you're using. This goes beyond the normal project planning. So, how will you measure accuracy and fairness of the AI system? What are the acceptable thresholds for error rates? What is the contingency plan if the AI system underperforms or fails? It means incorporating ethical review processes into the project plan. And that's difficult. It's time consuming. If you have to set up an ethics committee to assess those impacts, that is a big step. The project plan needs to also address data governance, good practice, data security, good practice, access controls, standard good practice, and privacy. What do I mean by privacy? Well, under the recent changes to the Privacy Act that were introduced in December, if you use an AI system that makes decisions which have a significant impact on an individual and you use information about that individual, in December 2026, you're going to have explainable AI in your privacy principles. That's a privacy policy on your website. This is a big issue. And if we move on to the execution and monitoring stages, these are where the AI system is actually built, deployed, and used. And during execution, again, you're going to have key issues on rigorous data management and ensuring that you've got high security thresholds in place. Handling data responsibly, securely, and in compliance with relevant regulations. And those regulations might be industry dependent, such as industries that are covered by the security of critical infrastructure legislation. Training your AI model is crucial. Using techniques to minimize bias, ensure fairness, and that might mean getting more data, augmenting data, using different weighting on your data, or potentially creating synthetic data that is representative of the environment in which you are working. Now, monitoring, uh, again, I'm preaching to the choir. Monitoring isn't a one-time activity. It's a continuous and ongoing process. But if you're using AI in your project, you probably have to monitor AI itself separately and in conjunction with all of the issues that you're already dealing with. And that might mean looking at user feedback on how the AI is operating. So creating stakeholder feedback loops to ensure you can see issues as they arise and potentially adjust the model based on those monitoring results. Now, that might require retraining, it might require providing additional data, and sometimes that might mean taking systems offline that you wouldn't have to in any other project. So do need to look out for unintended consequences because AI systems can sometimes behave in unexpected ways. You need to be able to detect these and address them promptly. Basically, it's the same as usual project management, but with a bit more work. And finally, I'm going to suggest we have a look at closure and review phases. So, closure, you're formally wrapping up the project, documenting lessons learned, but also documenting lessons learned from AI implementation. What worked well? What would you do differently next time? And that's both technical and ethical issues. Did the AI system work the way you thought it would? Were there any issues which were odd? How did your governance work during the project? And I think it's useful to have a review, have a part as part of the closure consideration of the AI system's performance. It means ensuring that all stakeholders are satisfied with the way the system worked and did it work on agreed standards. And the review phase, which happens usually after the projects, is also another a chance to look at these. And in particular, look at issues. Did your monitoring work? And what can you do to improve next time round? Essentially, that usual continuous learning. How do you make the AI project, your next AI project, work better than the last one? Now, I'm going to look at a few focus areas, and I'm going to start with bias and fairness in AI governance. Now, AI systems learn from data. If you look at the large language models that you probably use, like ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, um, any of the smaller models that you might use, where did they learn? Well, they learned on the internet. Sadly, the internet is biased. Even Reddit conversations and Wikipedia have biases built in by their authors. And this can produce an issue in AI. So there are several types of AI bias, data bias. If your training data isn't representative of the real world, if you've trained a risk assessment on past projects, it might reflect the breakdown of the demographics of the people who worked on those past projects, and you can end up with an issue there. You can have issues of algorithmic bias where the algorithm favors a particular outcome, even if the data is unbiased. So think of a project management scenario. You've got an AI-powered tool used to select candidates for project roles. If the training data primarily consists of successful project managers from a particular demographic group, probably people who are, for example, are look like me, might be a bit younger, you'd end up with AI candidates, with the AI selecting candidates that come from the same group. And a risk assessment tool, for example, trained on past projects where risks were systematically underestimated, that underestimated risk would flow through into a new project. So, how do you deal with it? Mitigating bias needs a multiple pronged approach. You need representative data sets or use data that reflects a full range of scenarios and populations. Fairness aware algorithms will help. And conducting a bias audit would also be useful. This These are big things to do, though, because it's not getting on with delivering the project. It is, however, an issue that probably needs to be done in terms of good governance for project management. So let's look at the next issue, which is transparency and explainability. Well, in project management, as you know, decisions have consequences. Decisions usually have very significant consequences. And if an AI system recommends a particular course of action, project managers and the stakeholders need to understand why. It's important for building trust. It also ensures accountability and make sure that those decisions are well informed ones. So imagine an AI system that predicts a high risk of project delay. If the project manager can't understand the rationale behind that prediction, they're likely not to trust it, and they'll be less able to take effective actions to mitigate the risk. What about an AI powered resource allocation tool that recommends assigning a particular task to a specific team member? If the project manager doesn't understand why that team member was selected over others, they might question the decision, leading to potential conflicts or inefficiencies. There's often a trade off between accuracy and explainability. Some of the most powerful AI models, like deep neural networks, are very difficult to interpret. Sometimes they're referred to as black boxes. However, there are techniques for increasing transparency even with complex models. These include explainable AI, model documentations, having a model card which explains the data sources, explains the algorithms and the assumptions made. Sometimes visualization tools are really useful to help users understand how a model is working and what factors are influencing its decision. So, project managers, you're constantly communicating with stakeholders, and some of that communication is going to have to be in an AI environment, ensuring that there's transparency of AI. And the next specific focus I'm going to look at is accountability and human oversight. Accountability is a complex question. Is it the developer of the AI system who's accountable? The data scientist who trained the model? The project manager who deployed it? The organization that owns the project? And the answer, of course, is all of the above. It's really important to define clear roles and responsibilities within the project team. Who's responsible for monitoring AI systems performance? Who has the authority to make changes to the system? Who's accountable for the outcomes of AI-driven decisions? Now, this leads to the need for clear escalation paths. If there's an unexpected or questionable result from an AI system, who gets to be notified? What's the process for investigating and resolving the issue? And this is particularly important in projects where AI decisions can have significant financial or safety implications. And humans oversight's pretty simple. You want humans to be in control, and those humans can be in control um, in the loop or on the loop. That is, in the loop, actively involved in decision-making processes, on the loop, monitoring and can intervene where necessary. The appropriate level of human oversight depends on specific applications and the level of risk. Sometimes human in the loop is necessary for every decision. Other times, human on the loop is sufficient. Part of the project management governance is to ensure that you've thought about both when in the loop is required or on the loop, and that the AI system is never allowed to operate completely unchecked. So, what's the role of the project manager in AI governance? What does it mean for you? Well, you're actually the ones who are at the forefront of AI adoption. You're the ones who will be responsible for integrating AI into your projects and for ensuring that it's used responsibly and effectively. You can think of yourselves as champions of responsible AI and essentially have a key role in promoting ethical AI practices and ensuring that AI governance principles are embedded in your project from the very beginning. This isn't about ticking boxes. It's about creating a culture of responsible AI within your teams. This means integrating AI governance principles into your project management methodologies. AI governance is not a separate add-on. It has to be weaved into existing workflows, all the way from project initiation and planning to execution, monitoring, closure, and review. And AI risk assessment needs to be a standard part of the risk management plan. Fostering a role and culture of ethical AI development in the project team is really key. And that means encouraging team members to speak up if they have any doubts or questions about the AI system. The reality is, if one person is able to express those doubts, they were likely there before. And there's another issue which is really hard, and that's staying informed. AI is evolving very, very rapidly, and so are the expectations of best practice around AI governance. It means making a commitment to continuous learning, coming along to webinars like this one and all the other ones that Ripon will be organising this year. Look out for training programs. Essentially, the more you know, the better you'll be equipped to lead in the responsible adoption of AI. Now, I'm going to move to a case study, and of course, it's not going to be a good news case study. So the Australian National Audit Office provides a really good insight into project management in their review of the Australian Taxation Office, or ATO. Particularly useful in the public sector, where AI is being used to enhance service delivery, improve efficiency, and ensure compliance. The ATO's experience underscores the loads of challenges that are associated with the implementation of complex technological projects, most of which I don't need to talk to you about because you already know. On the other hand, this provides, I think, a useful insight. So the ATO wanted to look at using AI in its operations to modernize processes, provide better services to you and me as taxpayers, and to strengthen compliance mechanisms. And what the ANAO report highlights is the need for robust governance. And essentially, the ANAO report emphasised that effective governance is not a bureaucratic necessity, but it's a fundamental principle. And it's a principle that underpins the success of any AI project. It's the foundation on which outcomes are built and risks are managed. The ATO's case study also demonstrates that the introduction of AI is the introduction of unique complexities, and that requires a rigorous governance framework. And one of the key challenges that the report highlighted is the alignment of AI with organizational structures, and particularly in the accountability obligations set up within the public sector. Government agencies like the ATO work within a complex web of regulation, policy, and most importantly, public expectations. Project managers in this environment have to navigate these complexities, but also drive innovation and change. And that is a delicate balance. It requires a high degree of stakeholder engagement. And one of the problems here was that the ANAO found that there were not key upfront measurements of what the risks were. It was worse, actually. There were not key upfront determinations of what the objectives of some of the projects were. So the roadmaps for the projects were, oh, it should make things better rather than being very specific. And the ANAO said what I said because it's actually pretty obvious. AI systems introduce specific risks, and these risks can have significant consequences. For the ATO, this includes undermining public trust. And so, what do you need? Oh, risk management, proactive risk management. And the ANAO report found that the ATO in 74% of its projects didn't have these in place. That isn't to say that the ATO shouldn't have been using AI. It's just that you need to apply sound project management principles and also ensure that those principles are built in to the whole of the management of the project. That is, to be part of the governance of the project. So, please don't be my next case study. The ATO was a pretty easy one to find. So we've covered a lot of ground today, and here's my grounding part. So I'm an academic. I often talk about abstract concepts, but I'm not going to end up with a call to action. And I'm going to talk about your role in ensuring that AI is used responsibly and effectively in your projects. And this slide summarizes some of the key actions for you, starting now. So, first one, easy, integrate. Embed AI governance principles into every stage of the project lifestyle. So, what does this mean in practice? Well, from project initiation, consider the ethical impacts of using AI. During planning, build in checks and balances for data quality and bias detection. In execution, ensure that AI-driven decisions are explainable and auditable. In project closure, review the AI's performance, not just against technical metrics, but against ideas of fairness. For example, if you're using an AI tool to predict project risks, ensure that the data used isn't biased. If you're using an AI scheduling tool, does it fairly distribute workload? Ensure that your AI system's decisions are understandable. It's not a separate AI governance checklist. It's this is our way of working, this is our workflow. Monitor and adapt. As I said at the beginning, AI is not set and forget. You wouldn't launch a project and not track its progress. You can't deploy an AI system and assume that it will always work perfectly. It means establishing clear metrics and to ensure that you're getting the desired outcomes. It means more review points to make sure that what you're doing within your project is appropriate. It also means being an ethical champion. That is championing ethics and in your project. And ethics is slightly different from the theoretical stuff of John Stuart Mill and Immanuel Kant. Instead, it's simple stuff. If I had to explain to my mum what I just did, would she be proud of me? Or would she tell me off? Simple things that are really useful to think about in the context of uh, being an ethical champion. Transparency. So How do you communicate? How do you collaborate? Use transparency. Tell people that you're using AI, what you expect the benefits will be, what are the risks that you're managing. Try and explain the AI's capability. Ultimately, at the end of the day, what you're doing is driving value and trust. AI isn't just about avoiding harm, it's maximizing the positive impacts. If done well, AI can reduce risks, improve efficiency, and enhance decision making. Communicating that to stakeholders will mean that it's not something to be scared of, it's something to actually help and improve outcomes. So I'm going to suggest to you go and implement these practices, be champions of responsible AI. But before I ask you to go out and be champions of AI, we've got time for questions. I know that Ripon has been curating questions as they come through, and I'm looking forward to them and trying to answer them. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Rob. Very informative session, I must say. I learned quite a few important things from your presentation, and you covered almost every aspects of potential AIs or AIs in project governance area or project management area. So thanks for the session. Yes, you are correct. We do have plenty, good number of questions already in the question and answer tab. I'm going to read them out one after another, and I'll definitely request you to answer them. For all our attendees, please feel free to write down your question in the by using the question and answer tab, so that I can facilitate that. Thank you. Okay, so the first question, as of I'm like the way I'm seeing, is from Ashwin. Are there any suggestions or examples of AI systems for project management?
So I use general purpose large language models to assist me in project management in research projects. So typically, I would be using Gemini with deep research. There's an OpenAI version as well. These are not the absolute free ones, they're the $30 a month ones. But we're at a we're always at a tipping point, but we're at a tipping point. So at the moment, those systems are really good to help me to think about the issues that are associated with project management. But increasingly, those same systems offer what's called agentic or agent-based AI, so that an agent-based AI can actually work effectively as a personal assistant in a particular field. And it might be, for example, that you set up multiple assistants. So in Gemini, they're called gems. Google is great on on these names. But so I can say, I'm going to use one gem. One gem that I use is I'm a PhD candidate in my first year, and I'm dealing with somebody who's supervising me. How can I manage how they think? Why do I do that? Because my other gem is I'm the supervisor of PhDs. I've got far too many years to count. How do I make sure my interactions are relevant? What does that do? It provides me with two different approaches to a similar problem. You can use those types of things in your everyday work, but I am sure that there are a large number of people who say, well, this specific project management AI tool is the best, but at this stage, I'm not perfectly convinced that I could tell you, go away and use AI project 123, but using all of the tools that are available now, just play. It's really,
Hmm,
if you've got time, play with it.
Sure. Excellent. Thank you. I can see also two hands up. So maybe I'll go with Anthony first. Anthony Wood. I'm not sure if you can speak up your question or feel free to write that down. Okay, so I think he'll write it down. So Jonathan, again, if you can't like unmute or ask the question directly, feel free to just write it down so that I can bring that up. Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, so the next question from I can see is of course from Osnat. He has given some appreciation and also mentioned, do you think that AI will replace current project management team tools such as Atlassian systems or MS Team systems?
No, I think that they'll actually enhance those tools. So we're already seeing Microsoft offering Copilot in Teams. So we're, I think what you'll see is for all existing project management tools, there'll be an AI add-on. Whether you get value out of that AI add-on it's entirely up to you. But there also will be a paid AI add-on, so there'll be a free version and a paid version. So is it going to replace those tools? No. Is it going to enhance those tools? Well, that's what all of the developers are going to be arguing it does.
Yep. Excellent. Thank you. I completely echo that. Okay, so the next question from Margaret. How do you know when using AI that there is no bias or illegal practices when researching or using content for presentations, reports, etc.?
Okay. So this is a complex one because the answer is you don't. But there are a couple of things. If you're using well-established AI models, large language models, which is probably where you'd be using this, one thing is to ask another one, is there copyright material in this? If you're using something like, so I'll give you two examples where you're fairly safe and one where you're not. If you're using Gemini or OpenAI, so Google or OpenAI, they actually have built in a a detector which says that if I use more than 180 words, which are contiguous and findable on the net, I should not be providing this in this form. So I'll rewrite. Grok, which is the AI system that you have to be on X to use, which doesn't have very many guardrails, does not have this safety net built in. So be aware of the models that you're using. But if in doubt, just ask another model, is how, can you source this information from the net? Now, I should have disclosed that the first two diagrams in first two figures in my presentation were, of course, produced by AI, but yeah, getting it to do it directly is also helpful.
Yes, of course. Thank you. Thanks for the question, Margaret. So the next question from Rizal. If organizations train black box AI products on their data, this would lead to different versions of the AI product. Does this pose a risk in bias or unintended consequences being introduced into the AI product that is then used by other organizations?
Okay, so I think I'm going to try and answer this a slightly different way. You can choose to train, well, so broad large language models, which are an example of AI systems, are trained on very large quantities of information and it's expensive training. You can fine tune those models, but that fine tuning is quite expensive as well. Your alternative would be to use something called retrieval augmented generation. And what you do there is say, Well, I'm going to use the large language model because I can talk to it, I can chat with it, but I'm going to use a corpus of information which is my information. So, for example, if you work for a large organization like, I don't know, the University of Sydney or the University of New South Wales, a whole bunch of policies could be used as a corpus of documents so that you can ask the question, well, what do I have to do to take a day's leave? It will actually use the policies and only the policies. And if you program it right, which isn't terribly hard, you say to the LLM, if you can't find the answer in that corpus, just say don't know. So one way of, I'm not quite answering the question, but one way of avoiding bias is to ensure that you actually use your own documents for modifying how the system is operating.
Excellent. Yes. So basically limit, like you should have a own silo, right? For
Yes.
internal silo. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. Thank you, Rob. From Kevin, I'm also out of the time. We only have 8 minutes. So let us see how many questions I can read out and Rob can answer. So from Kevin, I got another question is, can you comment on data security within AI systems? How can you ensure that highly confidential or sensitive client and internal data is protected?
Yeah. So two approaches. One, if you're using what would normally be a web-based AI system, you pay for the corporate version where if you trust OpenAI or Google, people do, then your data is not used for training. Your other option, which is a lot easier than it sounds, is actually to locally host a model, and models like Meta's Llama product. The Google has one called Gemma, Microsoft's Phi. They can always all be hosted locally, and you can just use your normal data security processes using a large language model locally.
True. For example, UNSW has its own version of ChatGPT. We bought it like we have the enterprise subscription. So whatever we're gonna put there, it will not go to the public. So
Yeah.
that's how you can possibly protect that. Okay, so Zaki, you asked about like, can we access a recording of this great session? I Yes, it is being recorded, and I think the AIPM office will possibly share the recording to all the attendees. If Sally or anyone has any particular answer to this, feel free to jump in. But definitely the session is recorded. Okay, so Paul, what are the data security risks? I think that's been answered, Paul. Rob already answered about the data security part. I'm skipping that question. Jolene, where would Grammarly sit in this space, if at all?
Okay, so I regard Grammarly as being a tool like spell check on Word. I don't, I, it does sit in the space, or it claims to sit in the space, but I don't think it does terribly much more than help you write. But it's a useful tool for doing that. So,
Hmm, okay. Thank you. Millicent has asked, AI requires fundamental investment of being provided a data set to drive the automation or machine learning in the same risk that crap in, crap out in scheduling, configuration management for resource capacity management. What would your comment be on this risk as an academic? How can a project management professional be mindful of this risk?
yep, no, garbage in, garbage out is absolutely a risk. It means actually hard work because it means curating data sets that are actually valuable and representative, or synthesizing data that is valuable and representative if you can't acquire the actual data that you require. It's also that threshold question, just because you can use AI in a project, if you don't have good data to begin with, it probably says don't.
Mm.
Better not to than to end up with a poor outcome, just as it is in any other IT project for the last very long time.
Yep. Okay, Anthony doesn't have any question. Okay, Ellie has asked, are there any legal or industry requirements that mandate project managers to reference AI in our documentation? For example, I use AI for creating specifications.
No, no, I'd recommend it for as part of your transparency that it's a good idea to say that you've done this. You also have a slight risk, and that is that any work, and I use this in the terms of the Copyright Act 1968, that's produced purely by an AI is not copyright. So, because there's no creator. So you have a slight risk in any case that whatever you produce isn't subject to the normal intellectual property protections that you would assume if you had written it.
Yep. Thank you. I think Aaron, of course, later mentioned that the question being asked, Muhammad has asked about how is privacy managed in the LLM as sensitive information would need to be shared. I think you already answered that, right? Nimi has asked, you said you can ask your data not to be used in the public domain. How do you do that? And how do you monitor that?
Okay, so how do you do it? By contract. How do you monitor it? With great difficulty. So, absolute safety is hosting your large language model locally. Um, Otherwise, you trust OpenAI or you trust Google. Um, many businesses do, and many government departments do as well.
Yep. Well, we are right on the clock, so it's just 2 more minutes. And I think we have answered, like Rob has thankfully answered all the questions. So I believe with that in mind, all the questions being answered and the session being recorded, and of course, Rob is kind enough to share his PowerPoint slides with me also, so that we can, like, of course, the AIPM has some certain rules and policies, and they will decide should they be distributed to the participants or attendees or not. Nevertheless, that was a fantastic session. And as I mentioned earlier, I repeat the same. I learned quite a few items, Rob, from your presentation. I know you didn't have enough time to go much more details because you got to finish that in 40 minutes. But with that, thank you. And thanks all the attendees, 250 plus attendees, which was a huge number, I must say. Thank you for being with us.